Welcome to Streets and Eats, the podcast where we want to inspire your next trip by telling you about some fantastic destinations and the best food to eat while you're there. Now remember, until the world opens completely back up and you feel safe to travel again, use this time to research and plan. In this episode, we're taking you to Georgia.
Not the state.
Not the state, but the country.
The Republic of Georgia.
Y'all.
How y'all doing?
How y'all doing?
That Georgia?
They probably do have an accent when they're speaking Russian.
But we wouldn't know it.
But we wouldn't know it. And their language is different anyway. So, yeah.
Well, Georgia is one of those places that I think it was your decision to go.
Well, we were looking at rounding out all of the countries in Europe.
Yeah.
We were living in Europe at the time.
And we really wanted to say we've been to every country.
Quite a few of them. At that time, I think only had Russia, Armenia, Georgia. I don't think we had been to
Ukraine or Belarus,
right?
For sure.
So the eastern parts were still kind of elusive to us. We'd done some of them, but not all of them.
We were starting to check them off.
And there's cheap flights when you're living in Europe, especially cheap flights everywhere. So we booked a trip to Tbilisi. And
it was someplace when Jim first mentioned it to me, I was like, oh, is that safe?
Right.
Is that someplace I really want to go? But as soon as I started looking into it, I could not wait to get there. It was going to be so much fun. We did, although we'll make it a different podcast, we did combine this trip with Armenia.
Right.
But we'll talk about that. Again, like I said, in another podcast. But Georgia itself, we spent a lot of time there and we had a good time.
But you're right. It was one of those places that when you're planning it, you're kind of wondering, is this a safe place? There had been problems with Russia in the north of the country, breakaway sections of the country that wanted to rejoin Russia, supposedly, kind of like what happened in Ukraine with the Crimea. And so we
it's
weren't
still
really
happening.
sure.
Isn't that happening now in Lithuania?
Sure. Well, yeah, similar things are happening in all of those satellite areas of the former Soviet Union. So you really have to think about it, if it's safe or not. And, looking at all the websites and all the research we did, it seemed like it was going to be a safe place to go. Crime wasn't a big problem, so we weren't really worried about that. It was more about if there was military actions or terrorism or that sort of thing.
Well, and that's pretty scary, if you ask me.
Right.
But there weren't, so we were pretty
wasn't,
safe.
and that's what all the advice said. And
in fact, nowadays it's become quite the digital hub where a lot of digital nomads live in Georgia. They've really welcomed tourism, and they've really welcomed.
Is that one of the countries you can get an extended visa in?
Exactly.
Good to know.
Yeah, and it's cheap. And
the food is good.
And the food is amazing. Wine. And they even have their own wine, yeah.
The people are probably opening up. You kind of get that in former Soviet republics, that sense from people that not necessarily they're giving you a cold shoulder or they don't want to be helpful.
But they're not sure who to trust.
But they're not sure who to trust. And it's hard to break into that circle of trust.
So Jim and I have a kind of a long history with former Soviet republics. When we were teaching in Turkey, we taught a lot of the embassy children. We were in Ankara, the capital.
Right.
And the embassy children from the former Soviet republics were invited on a special program to go to school at our military school because we worked for the U.S. Air Force there. And they came on the base and they would go to school. So we had kids from Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan and from Ukraine, from Estonia. We had kids from all over the place. And we really, because of that experience, we really learned what warm, fun people they were. And it really sort of spurred us on to see as much of that part of the world as we could. And yet we still haven't seen as much. I haven't gotten to the stands yet. And
Central Asia has eluded us still.
And so it's settled right on our list, and we plan to go there as soon as we can.
And, we do say now that we have been to all the European countries, but depending on who you ask, Azerbaijan
Well,
is,
see,
is
according
by some considered part of Europe, and we have not been there.
we
But
haven't.
Other than that, I think we've got it covered.
We've hit them. If you consider Azerbaijan European, we have not hit that one, but we've hit every other country that's considered Europe. Personally, I don't consider the Caucasus European at all. They just aren't.
They're their own entity.
They are not even like the Eastern European countries like Ukraine or Belarus or
Yeah, but at the same time,
Latvia.
are they really Asian?
I
you don't
think they
get that
feel more
sense
Asian,
there.
more sort of Middle Eastern, I think.
Kind of, yeah, I guess so. They straddle both, so you get the influences from both, and you really feel that when you're in the country.
But at any rate, we
went
enjoyed it.
and we landed late at night at the airport, the last flight coming in.
Because we like cheap flights.
And we had arranged a ride through our hotel. It wasn't like a limo or anything like that.
No, a ride.
But it was someone who met us at the airport, waiting for us with a car to take us directly to the hotel. We don't always do that. If there's other options to get to your hotel, public transportation especially, that's kind of how we like to do it.
Well, it also depends on what time we're getting in. If I'm getting in 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to deal with public transportation. Then I want to get direct to my hotel. I don't. A lot of times that public transportation isn't available, which it wouldn't have been if we had set up something else. And then you get into that situation where you're landing in a foreign country that you're not familiar with, and having to find a taxi or a ride to your hotel. Well, and the problem with that
can be a real challenge.
The problem with that also is that if you're a taxi driver, if you just get a random taxi driver, they may or may not know the hotel. So we've been left off in places. I remember I was in China one time and I gave them the address in Chinese script and they dropped me off where they said that address was, and it was not.
And that was not it.
And here I was with my 2 teenage daughters all alone.
Now what?
In this new country where I don't speak the language. And it was a little bit disconcerting. Did I find my hotel? Yeah. But, and did it turn out fine? Yes, it did. But it was a little disconcerting that this taxi driver just dropped us off. And that's not the only time it's happened.
Sure.
A lot of times they'll drop you off like half a block from the hotel just because it's hard to get into it sometimes.
Right.
Depending on where it is. And they don't have a place to stop or
that
park.
happened in Morocco.
And also in Spain. So, but at least we speak Spanish.
So, and if it's daytime, then that's not really so much of a problem. And at the same time, taxis can be your first chance at being scammed when you get to a new country. You may not know how much to pay and they'll overcharge you, that sort of thing. Or they'll try to take you to their friend's hotel.
But we're getting off topic.
We are getting way off topic.
We are really flying off topic here.
But it's all good stuff.
Of course.
Okay, so we climbed in the taxi late at night, last plane to arrive. The airport was emptying out. The roads were empty. And this guy's just flying down the road. He's just cruising along like there's no speed limit. And these are not great roads.
No.
So we're bouncing and jostling in the back seat. And every now and then he'd turn the dome light on and look at us through the mirror and then turn it off and keep going. And it was a bit longer than we expected. But, we pulled up to the hotel and the woman that ran it was there waiting for us. She knew we were coming. And to bed we went. And we didn't really get to see anything because it was dark and almost had a deserted feeling, kind of an eerie feeling coming in. We weren't sure what to expect.
I like coming in at night though, because sometimes, I don't know, you just get a different view. So yeah. I don't mind coming in at night. I just don't like getting there too late. Well, Georgia is located on the Black Sea and it's basically north of Turkey. And so it shares a lot of the same characteristics I would say the Turks share.
Right.
And that really made us feel at home because we had lived in Turkey for 4 years. So we were really kind of ready for it. And right away, we felt the Georgian hospitality, like right away. Yeah. The hotel was very friendly. Everybody in it. We were the only foreigners. So they fed us and told us where to go and where the bus was and things like that.
So we flew into Tbilisi, and we planned on only spending
we don't spend much time.
2 days
Usually
in Tbilisi on the front end of it.
I don't even think we spent 2 days, just a day. We picked up the car and went.
I think we spent 2 nights. The night we got there.
Well,
and the next day we just did things around the hotel, which the hotel, we picked one that was near the Holy Trinity Cathedral.
That's right.
Which at the time it was their,
it's like their Independence Day.
Memorial type day, Independence/Memorial Day. And so the military was out in force doing a parade and holding the flags, the Georgian flag, all around the cathedral. They had set up a memorial inside the cathedral for 21 soldiers that had lost their life
on the border.
And it had kind of a somber feeling, but at the same time, it was a beautiful day and the flags were flying. So it also was very kind of beautiful too.
It was.
And it's a
beautiful.
gorgeous cathedral. It's not an old cathedral. I think they've built it since their independence as kind of a show of, their independence.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. And it was just sad that there was, some death.
Yeah.
Our first day, we're kind of walking into a sort of a funeral procession. That was a little downer.
Yeah.
But surrounding that was really beautiful, like Jim said. And that was also the day we went and got our rental car.
So yeah, then we went and got
getting our rental car was quite the experience. I think we were there for almost 2 hours.
It took a while.
It took a long time, but I have to say, I got some really good information from those people.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the reasons why it took so long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we were just talking and having a good chat and learning more about the country and places that we shouldn't miss. And they were willing to share that information. So that was very cool. But we got the car from this particular agency because we wanted to drive into Armenia. So we couldn't do like the big 3 rental agencies. They're in the country and you can rent from them, but they don't allow their cars to go outside the border. So you have to find a rental agency that allows that and arrange it beforehand so that they have all the paperwork ready for you when you get there. Otherwise, you're going to have another 2 or 3 day delay while they get the cross-border paperwork set up. So we had done all that ahead of time. We went to get the car and it did take some time. They had to get the car. It was at the car wash, bring it to us. We spent a whole lot of time looking over the map, talking about, we knew we had ideas of where we wanted to go, but we didn't really know the best things to do, all the best things to do once we were there. And it's always a good idea to get the local advice because not everything is to be found in the guidebooks or on the websites.
Well, and Georgia just doesn't have that much written about it because there's not tons of people who had been there.
Right.
Or who have been there still, even though, like I said, it's opening up and I think a lot more digital nomads are going through there. There still at the time, there really wasn't tons and tons of information because I think we do our research pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. We knew areas we wanted to go to. And we knew things we definitely wanted to do, but you always want to find out, what else is there.
And of course we always leave.
And what's the best food?
And
what's
finding
their
out
favorite food?
That we haven't seen at all.
Oh yeah, of course.
And we always have to go back. And Georgia definitely fits into that category for us. We definitely did not get everywhere we wanted to go. That's for sure. But really, right after picking up the car, I guess we spent the night again.
Stopped at an ATM and loaded up on cash because it can be very challenging once you're out in the countryside, especially. You definitely want to have the cash with you. And yeah, we hit the road. Our first foray out was to the north. And we went to the wine growing regions.
In Georgia. Actually this is where we had actually taken the car first and went to Armenia. So we did a few days in Armenia. But then we came back and we went straight north, like Jim said.
But like I said, Armenia would be we'll do that as a different podcast.
Yeah. And we went to the Kakheti region, and the Kakheti region is known for their wines. And we were like, Georgian wine? Are you kidding? And I mean, these are mountains. And we couldn't believe it. But we tried the wine, and we had a few different places where we got lessons about how they store their wine and how
Georgia has a long, ancient history of wine. They claim to be one of the earliest wine makers of the world. And I mean, who am I to say that that's not true? They definitely have the archaeological evidence to back it up. And it's just a fascinating process that they go through. They don't have...
It's not the same as other places.
Yeah, they don't have the wooden casks that they store the wine in.
They have more like the Grecian urns that they used to have. And they used to store them underneath their floors, underneath the buildings, as opposed to, I mean, it was still like a cellar, but not, because it was just sort of holes in the ground where they put these casks, and then they would ferment them there. It was really good. It was really interesting.
My favorite wine. I loved it.
It was your favorite wine?
Yeah, some of their wine is my favorite. I really like the Saperavi. That was the best. It's a red wine. That was really good.
Well, Jim is much more into wine than me. I don't really remember.
Licorice and blueberry.
A little pretentious. No,
not at all.
No, not pretentious
Very bright.
at all. Very welcoming and friendly, as a matter of fact. Well, one of the things that we had done while we were at the rental office is I had heard about Khinkali. And Khinkali are the national dumpling. And I'm very much into dumplings. If you go on my site, you'll see that we like dumplings.
That's right. So that's one of the questions that we were asking about. Where can we do a lesson?
Yes. And they were like, are you crazy? We don't do that kind of thing. Are you
crazy? Nobody does that. And so we were looking at the map and we were saying all the places, the areas we wanted to go. And so the one woman said, well, maybe in the Kakheti region,
in Tel Aviv,
I have a friend there that has a restaurant, and I think maybe they'll do it.
And so we rock up to this restaurant in Tel Aviv, and we hadn't spent much time in Georgia yet. So first of all, we get to Tel Aviv and we go to our, it was basically a B&B.
Right.
And so the son spoke, a beautiful place, an old Ottoman house.
Yeah.
And the son spoke pretty good English. So that was a bonus. And we told him that we had heard that Restovani Tel Aviv would give us
does lessons,
cooking lesson. And he's looking at me like, lady,
you're crazy.
I think you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And I said, if you wouldn't mind, it would be really nice if you could call them. So he does. And turns out that they're willing to do us a lesson for, I think they charged us $10.
Right.
The equivalent of $10. And we're like more than willing to pay $10 to get a lesson on how to make traditional Khinkali. And off we tromp to this restaurant, which only had one customer when we were there.
Yeah. It was kind of a strange time of day.
It was. It was after lunch
too.
And we were there in April. So, yeah, I mean, there's reasons, I guess. I don't know how many people eat out on a regular basis in the hinterlands of Georgia anyway.
But they did have, at one end of the property, not in the restaurant right there, but on the other end of the property, they had some wooden like cabins set up around a central area with tables where it looked like they would do different types of traditional craft activities and lessons like that. So I think that's where they got the idea to send us there. But I don't think cooking was really one of the lessons that they offered.
As it turns out, though, we got 2 lessons because not only did they show us how to make Khinkali. Well, first of all, okay, so this was such a great lesson. It was such an experience. They take us back into the kitchen and they basically tell the people back there, oh, you're teaching them how to make Khinkali.
And this was a very rustic kitchen. Very
rustic. It was clean, but it was, I mean, there was a Khinkali dough pressing machine. But other than that, there was a sink and
Not
a
lot,
stove.
right?
And the stove.
That was the Kinkali room, actually.
Yeah, and the stove
I don't think they
basically
did
was
anything
a
else in there.
gas tank with a
Gas
grill
burner.
on top of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a stove per se. But anyway, you could tell. I mean, I don't speak Georgian, but I could tell that when he told her she was teaching me how to make kinkali, she was not impressed.
No.
But, I mean, that's the boss and you do what the boss says. We end up having such a good time.
So much fun. Laughing.
There wasn't a waitress who spoke some English. So there was some.
Oh, yeah, because Jaja had left. He was only there to, the son from the B&B was only there to
he dropped us off and he took off. Yeah.
Once they said, come on in, he was like, I'm out of here. But yeah, there was a waitress that spoke pretty good English.
Yeah.
And so she came back and translated with the cooks.
And we just had
and
a
it was
blast.
Quite a process. They showed us how to make the dough. We made a huge batch of dough for the day, water and flour, basically. And then they showed us how to roll it out and how to use the metal rollers that presses the dough flat. They didn't, no hand rolling here. This is this high speed, seriously industrial.
But it was a hand crank.
No, it was electric. And when you turned it on, clunk.
Well, remember, the lady who was teaching us had scars.
And she said, watch yourself.
She had
watch
her
your fingers.
hands cut in there.
Because
So
you get your fingers caught in between those metal rollers and you're going to be making kinkali out of your fingers.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit dangerous. There was no guards or anything like that. It was, you just take the small piece of dough that you've flattened with your hands, and then you kind of throw it in between the two rollers and it spits it out. And you look at it and you turn it and you 90 degrees and you flip it back in and you keep turning it until it gets to be the right size and the right thickness.
That was the easy part.
And that's the easy part.
And then you had to fill them, and they already had the filling made on one side, but then they made some with us, and it was a basic filling. It was meat. I put it on my website.
A meat filling, yeah.
Yeah. And then they showed us how they had to close the dumpling, and this is always where you have trouble because
and
these ones
process.
kinkali look like little purses. And so basically it looks like a spiral pleat. And then you kind of cut off the top so that it's and it looks like a little purse. It's meant to look like a little purse. And then they even showed us how to eat them when we were done. And the way you eat them, there is a right way and a wrong way. Is you want them to have the whole reason they're like that is to keep the broth in there.
Yeah.
And so you just take a little bite off the top by the top knot, and then you sort of suck out the broth and then eat the
rest of
the dough
with the filling.
And it's delicious. And we had kinkali, I think, if not every day, almost every day.
At least once a day. Not every meal, of course, but could have.
Yeah, it was so good.
So that dumpling pleating and knotting is pretty challenging. I don't know that we ever really got it to their satisfaction.
Didn't. They kept telling us we had Chinese knots or Russian knots or
but
American
they could just
knots.
Pick up a flattened piece of dough, plop on the filling, and do a little bit of magic with their fingers and put it down. 2 seconds max. And they were just whipping these things out. But for us, it took more like a minute
for each one.
Maybe.
And then they were so bad.
Then they were like, okay.
They're like, well, they're eating them, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah, we ate all the ones we made, so it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like we were serving them to anybody or anything like that.
And after we made them, she dropped them in this huge pot, and then she scooped them out with a wooden spoon that had holes in it.
Humongous wooden spoon.
Yeah, it was huge.
Well, the bowl of the spoon was what? Probably 8 inches, 10 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great.
Thick wooden spoon with holes in it to drain.
And then after we made the kinkali, I mean, they got, while we were there, and I mean, this usually happens, is that, you end up having one or two people and then someone else comes to see what's going on and gets into it, and then someone else shows up. Well, by the time we finished making the kinkali, there was a couple of other women whom I don't even know that we ever even got their names, but they were like, well, we're making shakela, and those are it's very typical in that area. They have them in Turkey too. They're basically it's almost like a candy.
It's almost like the fruit leather, right? It's
like fruit leather stuffed with walnuts, right?
Right.
And these ones had hazelnuts on them too.
Yeah.
So you can put any kind of nuts in them, but the ones that we've normally had walnuts in them.
Right. But instead of like a fruit leather, you would make like a reduced fruit juice to it becomes very thick and pasty, and you'd spread it out. Well, for shakela, you string the nuts onto a string, kind of like you were making a popcorn string for a Christmas tree or something like that. So about 8 inches of that. And then you dip it into the
boiled must,
the grape must that's been reduced to a really thick syrup.
And must, if you don't know, is the juice that's pressed out of the wine before it's fermented.
Right, exactly. So you dip it delicious. In and you pull it out and you let it drip off and you let it dry or cool, and then you dip it again. It's kind of like making a candle at this point.
Very much like making a candle.
And then you hang it to dry, just like you would a candle, once it's got a nice thickness of the fruit on it.
It's supposed to be like a superfood.
So that was our second lesson, which we were never expecting to get, but really glad we did, because we would see shakela all around the country at different stalls. Everywhere you would go for like a tourist destination, one of the stalls invariably was dried fruits, dried candy, or dried nuts, and shakela.
Yeah, it was really fun. And it was just hilarious because they laid out this whole table for us and we tried.
Pretty soon they're breaking out the wine. What kind of food.
They're bringing out their local hooch, and we're just drinking and eating and having a good old time. They're
slaughtering a chicken blast. As we were leaving, but we were like, no, we really have to get going.
That was so much fun.
That was good. That was in Tel Aviv.
And that was just, because we were kind of bent on doing it, and so we made it happen, and it did, and it was a great experience.
But that whole region is known for its wine, so it's a wine growing region, so you can go to wineries and try different wines. Of course, there's the fortress monasteries that Georgia is well known for. There's a great one there called Oliverdi, and the whole time that we were driving, we drove north out of Tbilisi and then east through the Kakheti Valley, and then eventually made our way back to Tbilisi in a nice round loop. But as we were driving out of Tel Aviv and to the east, we're kind of going along the base of the Caucasus Mountains. And
it was gorgeous.
Was just a stunning crystal blue day.
Well, and there was snow on the mountains.
There's still snow capped but
it was spring down below in the valley.
Yeah. It was just incredible. All the grapevines were starting to bud. Really beautiful.
It was
really beautiful.
Stunning. So we did that. We ate all kinds of good stuff. We made these things called eggplant rolls, khachapuri, which is like an eggy, cheesy pizza bread kind of thing. There is lobio, which is a bean soup. And our favorite is dolma. Dolma is the same in Turkey. And you can dolma means stuffed, and you can stuff anything from peppers to cabbage to tomatoes to you name it, whatever you want to stuff.
They'll stuff it with everything.
And it's
lamb, meat,
good.
Beef, chicken, pork, potatoes. Yeah.
But that was only the first stop on our trip. We went to a couple of other places too. One of the places I remember going is Gori, where that is where the infamous
Stalin Museum.
Well, it's where he was born. His family was from.
Yeah.
So there's a huge Stalin Museum there.
And they have the log cabin where he first grew up is out on the grounds, and it's covered, and you can go and tour Stalin's birth cabin. The
entire museum is quite interesting. And when you go into museums that are like that are completely not how you grew up and not what history you have read. Your eyes are opened a little bit to what the quote unquote enemy or the other side thinks, and what propaganda they were seeing versus what propaganda we have
fascinating.
seen. It's just, it really is fascinating to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you should take those opportunities every chance you get.
I just think that's one of the main reasons that you travel, right? Is you want to see other people's way of
get their perspective,
thinking, and their way of life.
Right. So that was, we did the Talavi part and through the Kakeru region and kind of a loop out of Tbilisi and then back through Tbilisi, but we still didn't spend much time in Tbilisi at that point. We kept going now west towards the Black Sea. We didn't get all the way out to the Black Sea. We kind of ran out of time somewhere around Kutaisi. Yeah, that's right. Which is pretty close. I don't know why we didn't just keep
We should have
going.
We should have, would have,
to
could
get to the
have.
Black Sea and put our toes in the Black Sea. But we really didn't have the time because for this trip, especially, we were kind of really spontaneous as much as we could be, making reservations either that morning or just finding a place when we got to the town we wanted to stop for the night. And it worked really well because it was off season. At that time, Georgia wasn't getting a lot of tourism. So we were very welcomed in that sense. And we didn't really have a hard time finding places to stay. But I kind of wanted to drive that road as much as I could anyway. It's the E60. It's Highway 1 in Georgia, but the E60 is a European highway. And it goes from Brest in France on the coast all the way through France and Switzerland and down into Bulgaria and then into Turkey, across Turkey, and then into Georgia and through Georgia, and eventually ends up in Kyrgyzstan. And I think it's the second longest highway
in the world.
So I really wanted to drive it. Now, ordinarily, driving the highway is not my favorite thing to do, especially an international one like that. It was loaded with trucks.
Yeah.
But it was the way to head west. It was pretty much the only way. So we did that. And then we kind of made our way back to Tbilisi off the highway as much as we could, which was really cool.
We stopped at a lot of monasteries and beautiful little towns with gorgeous little calles and castles in the middle of them with towers. And there wasn't, in Tbilisi, there's plenty of restaurants. Of course, it's the capital city and there's embassies and stuff there. So there's always business and stuff to cater to. But when you get out in a lot of these smaller towns, you're sometimes going where there may have one or two restaurants.
Right.
So you don't have a lot of choice and you just go there, but it's always fun anyway. So we ate, we didn't go hungry.
Part of the adventure,
fine.
Not knowing what's going to happen and what you're going to get. And it was a lot of fun.
And we went on this one mountain road that was really cool. And it went through all these villages, and every village had their own little product.
Oh, yeah.
That they were famous for, or a little group of villages. So like a co-op. And I was on a mission to find one of those Kinkali spoons that we'd experienced.
Yeah.
And I did finally find one on this road.
Well, it's kind of a fun story. We're driving through these villages, like you said, and they're separated probably about 20 or 30 minutes between each one with just farmland.
Only because the roads were so crap. It was only a few kilometers, but the roads were really, really bad.
There were some bad roads in Georgia. But we went through one town that was a bread town, and you would buy the bread pretty much fresh. So they would kind of cook it sporadically throughout the day, but they would have ceramic or porcelain depictions, sculptures, if you will, of the bread itself. So you saw what they were making, and then you would just pull up and get a fresh loaf. So we drove through that town, and we drove through a town that was selling handmade baskets
and hammocks
and another town. And then a town that had car parts for some reason, like headlights and mirrors and things like that, all packaged up and ready to sell. And then we went through a town that had wooden tools. And we thought, okay, this is it. We're going to find it. So we went really slow past several stalls, and it was more like woodworking tools type of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Not really
that was a
kitchen
failure.
tools.
So we left that town, and there was no more towns for a while. And we were going up a mountain pass through the really sharp turns, the hairpin turns. And on some of the hairpin turns where it widened out a little bit, there would be little stalls of different handicrafts for sale. So we're driving and we're going up this mountain pass, and there's a ton of trucks. And I just managed to pass this one truck that was going really slow and pumping out smoke left and right. And so I'm passing him, and so I'm speeding up and
I yell out,
coming into this sharp hairpin curve, and you yell out, "Stop, spoon!"
And Jim's like, "What?"
Screech! Off the road we go, even though we had just passed his truck, and he's kind of barreling up on us into the gravel, and we kind of come to a halt in front of this little stand in a little cloud of dust
and gravel.
And we jump out, and sure enough, here's a King Kali spoon. It's about 4 feet long. It's got the hugest bowl you've ever seen on a spoon. It's thick.
And I'm buying it. I wasn't leaving there without it. I bought it.
It's just incredible. It's an incredible spoon.
It is an incredible spoon. I almost didn't get it through the airport, air security, because they're like, "What is this?"
We carried it on the plane.
And I'm like, "It's a spoon. It's a King Kali spoon." And they're like,
of
"Oh, you
course.
like King Kali?" I'm like, "I love King Kali," which I do love King Kali.
Problem solved.
And they're like, what is your favorite? Of course you can take it. Yes. Oh, yes. King Kali.
No problem.
Yeah. Too hilarious.
That was fun.
Another part of the road trip that was amazing, and probably maybe my favorite part, I mean, believe it or not, our favorite part is yet to come. And that was driving the military road.
Oh, yeah.
And the military road connected Tbilisi with Moscow. And so it takes you right up to the Russian border. And we drove right up to the Russian border.
Right.
We didn't cross the border. We just drove up to it. But it took you up into the mountains that still had snow on the peaks. And we went, like we said, basically from a valley that was all springy to the middle of winter, where they were still clearing with huge machines the snow from the tunnels and stuff. Yeah. So
making snow tunnels.
And it was just, first of all, it was a beautiful drive.
And that road was very good, actually.
Stunningly beautiful. It was. Most of it was good.
Until we got to the tunnels. Do you remember those tunnels?
The tunnels were
frightening. There was not much two-way traffic. Most of the traffic was heading towards Russia for whatever reason. I'm not sure what. But there was some oncoming traffic. And you would get into the tunnels. This is at the top of the pass. And some of them had windows cut into the sides so that you get shafts of light coming in. But that was it. It was headlights or pitch black. And these were the worst parts of the road. We're talking like 3 foot, 4 foot wide, 5 foot wide potholes that are a foot deep that you have to kind of work your way into slowly and then work your way out. Well, that's fine for a car, but the trucks didn't do that. The trucks tried to avoid the potholes. And so they would use the entire road surface. They didn't care what lane they were in. They were avoiding the potholes. And so when you saw a truck coming at you in your lane, swerving back and forth with their headlights coming at you, you just kind of had to slow down. They knew you were there and hope for the best. But we were safe. But the views from the top of that pass, oh my God. Stunning. Well,
and that's where we saw the friendship memorial,
right?
The Russian and Georgian friendship memorial, which we're like, what is that? It was something that we had no idea was there.
Massive circular structure with tiled mosaic scenes
very Soviet
all around it. Yeah, very Soviet looking. But a popular attraction. There's a couple of cars there with their trunks open with espresso machines, like the huge barista type espresso machines in their trunk. And they're out there doing a booming business.
They had some kind of sweet they were selling along with it. I don't remember. We didn't actually buy anything because we weren't ready for it. We were like, wow, this is here. We're going to stop.
There was a ski area. We did stop at the ski area.
Well, that's where we ate lunch too.
Ate lunch in a log cabin type place. Delicious.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But that was probably my favorite of all the roads. And we had some beautiful stops for the monasteries and Ananuri Castle, which is not too far outside of Tbilisi.
Yeah, you could do that just from Tbilisi as a day trip.
And then we went back to Tbilisi, but unfortunately, we're out of time. So we're going to have to make Tbilisi its own
we'll do a top 10 Tbilisi
podcast. Yeah.
That'll be next week.
And plus, we have a lot more stories because of the capital city, of course, there's a lot going on there. There's
That's where
always
everything
things
is.
to talk about. So we will definitely do that in another one. Not next week, but coming up.
So if you're thinking of places to go visit once you can start traveling again, hey, we've got a booster now. So
yeah, we even have
we're ready for the world
COVID
to open
booster.
back up.
Mm-hmm. We are ready for the world to open up. I'm not sure if the world is ready for us.
We'll be ready when they are. But keep Georgia on your mind,
so to speak.
It's a great destination, and we really think you're going to love it.
I got to say, it was much better destination. I kind of went into it. I was excited, but I kind of went into it with a few trepidations,
right.
a few little worries. And within the first day, I was just
none of those worries ever materialized.
This is an amazing place.
Yeah.
We just loved it.
Thanks for joining us at Streets and Eats, and thank you for listening to our podcast. We really want to encourage you to savor your adventures. Please remember, hit the subscribe button. Don't miss an episode, and help us out. And please share with your friends. Join our Facebook group, Streets and Eats, and check us out on our website,
Reflections en Route and Roving Veils.
Or Roving Veils.
All right.
All right.
So ciao for now.